Hello and welcome to Farm Connections. I'm your host, Dan Hoffman. On today's program, Corey Hoffman tells us about the devastating effect a barn collapse has had on his family's dairy farm. We have a conversation with Chip Flory about AgriTalk Radio. The University of Minnesota Extension brings us another best practice, and we have a new focus on 4-H. All here today on Farm Connections.
Welcome to Farm Connections with your host, Dan Hoffman.
Farm Connections made possible in part by
Alcorn Clean Fuel, a farmer-owned renewable energy producer in Claremont, Minnesota for more than 20 years, producing ethanol, high-protein livestock feed, and corn oil for resale to benefit its members and their communities. Absolute Energy, a locally owned facility, produces 115 million gallons of ethanol annually, proudly supporting local economies in Iowa and Minnesota. Absolute Energy, adding value to the neighborhood.
Back in 1944, Sam Bauer had a vision to provide tires and heating oil to families. This second and third generation family-run business is still focused on commercial truck, retread tires, tires for your passenger vehicles, and farm equipment too.
Novel Energy Solutions, committed to working with farmers and landowners to deliver a new crop, electricity. More about income potential and lease agreements designed to be top performers at novelenergy.biz.
Welcome to Farm Connections. We're at the North Creek Farm in Chatfield, Minnesota, and with me is Corey Hoffman. Corey, thanks for having us.
Hi Dan, nice to meet you.
You know, normally we have nice full barns in our background. What's this?
This was after the blizzard on Sunday, February 24th. This is what the aftermath happened. So we had the morning of the 24th, we had our first collapse actually right above us. It was about 80 feet by 100 feet. And we mainly spent that day and the next day just digging cattle out of the rubble and trying to save what we could. And then on Tuesday morning, February 26th, we had about 30 people coming to help clean up the mess, clean off the roof, and get prepared. And they were coming at 9 a.m. And 5:45 a.m. we had a second collapse happen towards the north end of the barn. And nobody died in either collapses, and that was, the number one thing. But right when that collapse happened, I just told Dad, I said, thank God it didn't happen 3.5 hours later. Otherwise, I'm sure we would have had some deaths. And I said, we got to get these cows out of here.
Well, when the first collapse went down, I couldn't believe the phone call that I got that morning. And I thought we'd make it through it. But when that second collapse happened that morning, I just thank God that I'm still here, because it only happened about 3 minutes after I'd walked out of the barn where I was standing. She came down. And I knew right away those cows had to go.
So immediately got on the phone, and I had a friend from Lake City. He and his wife knew the predicament we were in, and he was actually in Michigan at the time, looking at another barn or something. And he just called me up. He said, "I'll take the cows," and they paid more than a fair price. And I said, "You have to take them right now." And he said, "Yep, I'll make phone calls and back home, and we'll get it taken care of." So we milked the cows one more time, and we got everything shipped out of here about 5 hours later. So
That's moving quickly.
Yeah.
How many cows were sold?
Let's see. So all said and done that day, there was about 360 that were sold. Plus we had the animals that perished, and then the corner over there, the newer part, we had some dry cows, and we sold them a few days later to a different farm. So there's 446 animals in the barn when the collapses happened.
Sounds like several miracles. One, no one was hurt or killed.
Yep.
Two, to get that kind of movement of cattle and finances in that short a time is pretty miraculous.
Yeah, no, it was, we were heartbroken, obviously, selling the cows and whatnot, but it was the right decision. But the thing that was really humbling was just all the help we had from people coming to help haul or help load cattle or whatever. I know at one point on Highway 30 there was 17 trucks and trailers waiting to load. Plus we probably had just as many trucks and trailers on the road with cattle. And my wife posted to Facebook that morning, like, hey, we had a second collapse happen. We need to move the cows. And that post got shared over 1,300 times. So I think it's pretty awesome.
But yeah, it's been overwhelming. The cards that we've gotten from people that we don't know from distances, and the notes they wrote, and everything, and the outpouring of the neighbors and friends that we got that helped haul cattle that day and just helped us get through that day. I said there was more trailers here that day than if we'd had an auction sale, but I didn't hear the auctioneer.
That was a good thing, right?
But yeah, right. But no, everything worked out real good.
So what's next? You went from absolute shock, despair, crisis, chaos, animals, snow, lumber all over, steel all over, not able to operate as a dairy farm. You went from that chaos to what?
I told them after the cows were gone and everything was okay that I would support them 100% of the way if we stayed out or if we went back. I said my heart's in dairy, but don't do it for Dad. I'm too old. And so we were in limbo for a while, and but once we kind of got back to somewhat normal, the boys and the girls decided that they wanted to go back. So here we are today, starting to build her back.
Recommitted, re-energized.
Yeah, right. I've had a lot of people ask me what it's like to start all over again, but I don't know. It's just something you do.
And all said and done, insurance came through for us, so we are able to get back in it. If insurance didn't come through, there's no way we could afford to rebuild this right now. The milk prices have been depressed for the last 5 years, and we're like every dairy farm. We haven't made any money the last 5 years. It's been a struggle. So, but we're planning on rebuilding. We're supposed to actually start August 1st and hopefully get into it later this fall.
So your risk management plan of paying premiums all these years is giving something back.
Yeah, getting something back. There was a lot of dairy farms that had collapses that, one, didn't have snow load coverage and didn't know that until the worst happened. And two, we've been trying to cut back on expenses the last few years because there is not any extra money. And one of the things I thought about cutting was insurance, but thank God we didn't. We kept paying it, even though it was tough. But yeah, so we were lucky.
Part of your resilience is you're coming back with cows yet this year.
Yep, correct. We still have our young stock. We have 286 heifers. And then we did find a farm south of here that would take our spring heifers, calve them out, milk them, and then we get them back once we're ready in here. But we're still going to have to buy probably around 350 head. So we're looking at other dairy herds, but it's going to be a while till we're ready for them.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
but the cows just south of where we're standing, those are the young stock that are going to be the genetics moving forward?
Correct. Those are springing heifers, and they'll all be calved out and milking by the time we get back in here. So we'll bring them back from the other farm into here. So.
And it's interesting that we're standing in a part of the barn that totally collapsed. There's no roof, there's nothing left. And just south of us, there's somewhat of a roof and a structure that looks pretty solid. There was some differences?
Yep. So in 2007, we built this barn, the holding area and parlor, and then in 2015, we put an addition on of 122 feet, and that was a different builder. And one thing we found out after this collapse is there is no building code for ag buildings in Minnesota. And the reason why that stood and this didn't, that had 35 pounds snow load. This only had about 20 pounds snow load. So it was same rafters, same design, layout, everything. It was just everything was beefed up a lot more, and that's why that stood. So that construction company is who's going to build this when we get back in it. So.
How many inches of snow did you get that day?
We really didn't get that much on the roof. I'm thinking like 16 to 20 inches. I think one thing that hurt us is at 6 p.m. we had some rain, and we had rain for about 3 hours, and then it turned to snow, and then the collapse happened at 1 a.m. Because my dad and I looked at the roof line Saturday afternoon, there really wasn't that much snow on it. And I think it was more the design and the way it was built that led to the collapse more than anything. Because after we sold the cows Tuesday. I helped a friend on Thursday shovel their barn, Friday another barn, and then Saturday a barn by Lewiston. And I know they had way more snow than what we had. So moving forward and seeing how their structures stood, we're redesigning this so there's going to be plenty of snow load rating on it, and hopefully we'll never ever experience it.
What do you think the future is of this farm?
So I only have the one sibling, my brother, who I farm with, and then he has one son, August, and then I have two children, Garrett and Tyra, and the oldest would be my son, who's 6. And I don't know, like I tell everybody, every generation has their struggles, and this is just our struggle now. But I'm gonna, my great-grandfather sacrificed himself for his son, my grandfather sacrificed himself for his son, and my father did it for me. And we wanna try to provide the opportunity for the next generation, if that's what they choose.
It was hard for me to see those cows go because I thought, where are we going to be in 5 years with the herd average that we got? I mean, the boys have done a phenomenal job along with the help that we've got, and everything was clicking. And yeah, I mean, maybe we'll have a better herd than what we had here.
I'm confident you'll build it back.
Well, I'm hoping that, I'm sure we can. I think there's going to be plenty of good cows for sale that, if we can buy them right. Yeah.
Good to hear. And I'm glad you're going to continue. Best wishes.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Stay tuned for more on Farm Connections.
Farm Connections Best Practices, brought to you by
Well, I'm Liz Stahl, Extension Educator in Crops with the University of Minnesota Extension, and in today's Best Practices segment, we're going to discuss planting a cover crop after corn silage for grazing. Now, there's a lot of different benefits that you can get from planting a cover crop, but one of the really nice ones is if you plant a cover crop for grazing, that can really help pencil out the economics for cover crops, especially when we're looking at the short-term economics benefits. But the challenge is you do need to do some planning ahead if you do want to graze a cover crop. The number one issue that a lot of people run into is what herbicide program they've been using. And it's not just the herbicide program for that particular year that you plant the cover crop, it also can be that herbicide program that you used the year before as well. Because the challenge is when we're planting a cover crop for grazing, we're treating that cover crop as a quote-unquote crop. It's getting into the food or feed system. So what that means is we have to follow those rotation restrictions that are listed on the herbicide label or any pesticide label that we're using. And a rotation restriction, again, what does that mean? That's that time period that we need to wait from application of that herbicide till when we can actually plant that cover crop. Now, the challenge that we have with a lot of our cover crops, when these herbicides went through the labeling process, they just may not have ever been tested, so there's not very much information out there. So if there's not a lot of information or the cover crop wasn't tested, they automatically get put into on the label this other cover crop category, and that typically has the longest rotational restriction that you'll find on the label. Now, some of these rotational restrictions that can be pretty short, like 0 to 4 months, but some of these get up to 18 months or even 30 months or more, which really kind of makes it not a feasible option to use when you're trying to graze that cover crop. So the number one thing to do when you are planning to plant a cover crop to graze is make sure you're looking at these pesticide labels, and it's not just herbicides, it could be the fungicide that you're using as well or other products. Again, make sure you're checking them out to make sure that you're following those rotational restrictions. Another recommendation would be is keep it simple with your cover crop mix. Some of our go-to cover crop species like cereal rye or oats, we do have more information on pesticide labels for these. They'll tend to have shorter rotational restrictions. So again, those can be really nice options to use. Also, look at that time period of when you apply that herbicide to when you plant that cover crop. The longer that you can make that, so for again here planting a cover crop after corn silage, you're having a wider window than say if you tried to interseed that cover crop after your pesticide application. There's a lot of nice resources online from different universities that summarize these rotational restrictions. They can be very useful to look at, but the bottom line is you want to make sure that you're checking the pesticide label to make sure that you're following any of these rotational restrictions. So again, I'm Liz Stahl, Extension Educator in Crops with University of Minnesota Extension, and thanks for watching today's Best Practices segment.
We're at the Rural Legislative Forum in Mankato, Minnesota in the Verizon Center. With me is Chip Flory from Farm Journal Media. Welcome to Farm Connections.
Thank you so much.
Well, you do some really interesting things, and I admire that. What do you do?
Well, I'm the host of AgriTalk Radio. It's 2 hours of live radio a day, separated with a 3-hour break in the middle of it. So we go live 10 to 11 o'clock every morning and 2 to 3 every afternoon. So in the mornings we talk issues. We talk farm bill, we talk trade, we talk waterways, we talk agronomic, RFS, ethanol, all those issues. Have the newsmakers on with me to start the conversation, but a lot of times we just end up in kind of a talk show, have the conversation, and really try to ferret out what it really means for all of America. Then in the afternoon, we talk markets. And then when we're done talking markets, we talk more markets. And we talk markets again. So it's all about markets in the afternoon.
Well, you do a great job, and it's certainly interesting to listen to.
Thank you.
You spoke of markets, and inevitably somebody will bring up the word tariff.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Like him or don't like him, he's sticking to his campaign promises, President Trump. He said that he was going to do something about it. He said that he was going to do something about NAFTA, even though many of us, including me, really didn't think that there was a whole lot that needed to be done with NAFTA. But it looks like in some cases he did improvement. Good for him and the team. When it comes to the tariff issues, it is really, sometimes it gets difficult to keep everything straight because it started with U.S. tariffs on imports of steel and aluminum. Those tariffs still in place, and the retaliatory tariffs against U.S. ag products, pork in Mexico, pork, soybeans into China, those are in retaliation to those initial tariffs against steel and aluminum imports. It doesn't have anything to do with maybe it's got something to do with intellectual property rights, but if we're going to see some real progress made, it's going to have to be a U.S. make the first step in lifting those metals tariffs before we can hope to see the tariffs on U.S. ag products lift as well. So it's forcing action. It's forcing action. It's forcing conversation. We just hope that we get to the right end zone.
And conversation is good. Let's keep making progress, right?
Absolutely.
So you've got a large audience. What do you tell them about the future?
Oh, wow. You know, the future is a topic that we try to get into as much as we possibly can, whether we're talking markets or issues. The velocity behind change in the industry right now is accelerating. It doesn't matter if we're talking about technology in the field or if we're talking about farmers sharing their opinions on social media. There's another area that we've seen so much progress and change over the last couple of years. So the velocity behind the change that is happening in agriculture is obviously increasing. The future's exciting. I don't think there's any question about it. It's going to have its challenges, but it is exciting.
And what advice do you have for young people as they're looking towards the future?
Yeah, agriculture is a spot where you want to be. Producing food for the globe is where you want to be. That's what I tell those young people, because agriculture is an important thing right now and going forward.
Should they continue their education?
Oh, absolutely. Continue your education. I don't care if we're talking about education in a formal setting or in an informal setting. You got to continue it.
And you have a following that is more than just farmers.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that to simplify it at all, but industry must follow what you talk about as well, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. And there's, I know that we have consumers that follow us as well, because every now and then we'll get communication back. They'll ask for further explanation on something that we talked about, that anybody involved in agriculture would understand what we were talking about on the show, but we'll get feedback, follow-up questions to come back, so we know that it's consumers that are also listening to the show. So that's an important thing that I need to keep in mind, and I need a reminder of that from time to time, just because it is important to talk to that consumer, that person that has been removed from agriculture for a period of time when we're doing AgriTalk, and I think that's all really important. But boy, when we're talking to farmers, we try to break it right down. Let's talk about what the Farm Bill really means. Let's talk about how EPA has been breaking the law when they've been giving the waivers out on the RFS. I mean, it's that simple. We don't pull any punches when it comes to stuff like that. We hit it as hard as we can.
And that's appreciated.
Yeah.
Please keep up the important work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on Farm Connections.
Thank you so much.
Stay tuned for more on Farm Connections.
Hi, my name is Mikenna Erickson and I am a 4-H'er in Freeborn County. Today I'll be telling you about how to show a steer. So the first thing you need to do when you show a steer is make sure you have a pen ready. We have a barn with corn stalks in it, so he has a little bit of bedding. And then we have feed, water, and hay for him available. Make sure it's clean water and clean hay and clean feed for sure, so he doesn't get sick. The first thing you need to do when you start showing a steer is you need to break them. So breaking them usually includes tying them up and brushing them until you get to know them a little bit, and then you start walking. And it's quite a process. It takes a while to make them know you and trust you and to walk good. And so right now, it's about a week before the fair, and we're walking for about a half hour a day. And then I rinse him to cool him off and brush him and make sure I set him up a bunch so he behaves well in the show. To get ready for the show, I clip him so his hair is about 1/16 of an inch, which is very short. It takes me about 4 hours to completely clip him. This is head to tail, except for the last foot of the tail, which we leave a little bit long so he looks good and we can poof his tail up and make him look really nice. To set him up, I keep his front 2 feet square, and then his back 2 feet are a little bit staggered. And to do this, you walk him into a stance and then use a show stick to set him up. Now the show stick can be a little bit intimidating to some steers, so you really have to get him warmed up to it. And that's about everything you need to know about showing a steer. This is my steer. His name is Zeke, and we've been working pretty well together this year. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Among the corn and soybeans so common across Minnesota are a number of industrial hemp fields. Industrial hemp was approved by the state of Minnesota under a pilot project which now allows permitted farmers to once again grow the crop. Industrial hemp was grown decades ago and used for hundreds of products. Because it's related to marijuana, industrial hemp became a controlled substance and illegal for farmers to grow. The new Farm Bill removed that designation, giving approved Minnesota farmers the chance to grow the crop, which some believe holds great potential.
I think it's a very viable crop to be implemented into crop rotations here, and I think it's a new valuable crop that will maintain some good value over the next decade or so, and even further beyond that after we kind of figure out exactly where its place is in the market.
Industrial hemp doesn't contain the psychoactive ingredients found in marijuana, but it does contain compounds extracted to develop CBD products that a growing number of people use for the treatment of numerous ailments, including pain, inflammation, and even anxiety. Midwest Farms is among those getting into the industrial hemp cultivation. The network of more than 40 farmers is breeding and growing industrial hemp to be processed into CBD products that include oils and even chewable products.
It's creating a third crop rotation. It's creating another cash crop that has super high value.
Agronomics are one challenge, but having the capacity to process the plant is key to establishing a viable long-term market. Midwest Farms has purchased a vacant building and has set up a processing facility to extract the oils and eventually to process hemp fibers.
We have buildings, and like for us putting the extraction facility, we're creating an elevator, a dryer, an extraction facility. We're creating an ecosystem. So we're not just, anybody can farm it, but how are you going to sell it? And that's the one piece that we're helping with the farmers is create that ecosystem.
Is there a future for industrial hemp for America's farmers? There's a lot of people here that think so. This is the plant. There's a lot of things we don't know about it, but we do know there's demand for CBD oil growing across the Midwest and across the country. This is Lynn Kettleson reporting.
Life is challenging and brings change when we want it the least. In these times, surrounding ourselves with a strong and supportive community makes weathering these challenges a little easier. I'm Dan Hoffman. Thank you for watching Farm Connections.